Hey there folks, Wrel here. Today I wanted to talk about a problem that relates very heavily to PlanetSide 2, which is balance by usage, or balance by scarcity, or even balance by scale, depending on which way you want to look at it. We'll define the problem, talk about why it's so annoying to deal with, and hopefully be able to provide some solutions to look at in the future. We are going to be talking a lot about the NS-AM7 Archer in this episode, but the focus should be on the concepts behind how usage can affect balance decisions. So when I say balance by usage, we're mostly talking about how a weapon performs or is viewed as performing when a lot of people use it, or when very few people use it. For example, Lancers are generally viewed as a very powerful weapon in groups, but not so powerful outside of a group. This is because it has advantages that scale well. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it hits with precision from very long range, so it's restrained by its damage output in normal situations, but used in groups, you can really make use of its other traits, which is what makes it powerful. Generally speaking, popular weapons see more use, and less popular weapons do not. And determining what makes a weapon popular or unpopular has a little bit to do with server culture, but it mostly has to do with how fun something is to use, how effective it is to use, and how much you have to give up to use it appropriately. An example of that is the NS-AM7 Archer anti-material rifle. A lot of people picked up this weapon when it was first released because that's what happens when you get shiny new toys, but over time people stopped using it because while it can create some funny moments, it's very specific in its use. You're basically leaving yourself defenseless in a normal combat situation so that you can kill an enemy max unit. So when the Archer's usage went down, maxes started feeling more prevalent, not only because people weren't killing maxes with the Archer, but also because having less Archers on the field means that it's safer to pull max units. Now this is only one side of the coin, because Archers, as it stands, are balanced around dealing with a max unit basically in a 1v1 situation. Because of that, they do a crap ton of damage, and it's a 3-shot kill to the body or 2-shot kill to the head. So that means if me and a buddy both pull an Archer, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it doesn't matter how far away you are, it doesn't matter how many engineers you have sitting behind you, you die. You die before having any idea what's happening. And with a laser sight, I can peek from cover and hipfire without risk, provided there aren't a bunch of infantry also shooting at me. This is a wizard problem. Basically meaning that when you have enough wizards, in this case AM7 Archer users, your burst damage gets so high that things just die without being a threat to you. Again though, this comes down to usage, because if nobody pulls an Archer, or if it's just you pulling an Archer, the damage you can do is limited because the rechamber time is long and it gives time for enemies to react to what you're doing. Right now, most of the people who use the Archer pull it reactively, as in you're screwing around in a base and then a max unit comes out and kills you, you say, okay, it's Archer time, and we can do that pretty easily because we're infantry, the downtime is low, doesn't cost us resources, and there's also no setup involved because we can hipfire the thing indoors. But we're also at a huge disadvantage of not having a primary weapon, and that's a huge turnoff. We generally don't like to feel helpless, which is ironically the same reason why we don't like max units in the first place. So because of that, Archer use is still rare, despite being a stupidly powerful option to dealing with enemy max units. There are different ways you can increase the weapon's usage though, which tips the scales in balance. The first way would be to just make the Archer more viable against infantry, so that you don't feel helpless. Another way would be to let the Archer use a different slot other than the primary weapon, so your secondary weapon or your turret slot, again, that makes it so you don't feel helpless, or you can increase the number of classes that have access to it. Now if you increase the number of classes who have access to it, naturally you'd have a better chance of getting the weapon to make an appearance, especially if it went to combat medics and heavy assault, since both classes are naturally better at dealing with enemy infantry than an engineer is. But again, you might come to the same conclusion that people just don't want to use the weapon because it's too specific in its function. If you let the Archer take up a different slot instead, so your secondary slot or your turret slot, then there would be little reason for you not to run an Archer loadout whenever you knew maxes could be in the area. So you'd quickly reach a point where there wouldn't be any point in pulling a max at all because you'd die instantly, and that's not fun. Despite how much we like to complain about max units, the point of balancing a game should be to make it more enjoyable for all players involved. So the other option would be to reduce the feelings of helplessness that the archer puts on the player and make the weapon more enjoyable to use. If you lower the damage it deals to max units but also make it more viable against infantry, you can reduce the wizard problem against max units, which means that they get to have more fun. You would consider pulling an archer more often yourself because being able to defend yourself is generally more fun, and you create a win-win. This isn't the only solution by any stretch of the imagination, but these three examples should show how different methods of increasing or decreasing usage can impact the overall experience, especially in PlanetSide 2, where at any point, you'll have any number of people, any number of classes, and any number of vehicles running around. There are plenty of other methods of limiting or increasing usage as well, but they're all pretty self-explanatory. You can put a level requirement on something to keep too many people from unlocking it. You could lower or raise the cost of an item so that it's more or less accessible to the player base, and you can also make it so items are more or less rare based on an arbitrary loot drop system. But all of those methods also need to keep in mind the player base's maturity over time. Eventually, for example, even in PlanetSide 2, if you play long enough, you'll have everything. Doesn't mean you'll actually use everything, but you'll have the option. Just something to think about when it comes to balancing a game. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you have any thoughts on balance by usage, please let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.
Watch your